Welcome to Crescent City Crime, dear listeners. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Brian.
And of course, as always, welcome to everybody, those of you who have either been listening to us already or new listeners.
Welcome, listeners. We really enjoy talking to you, having you with us.
Yes. And of course, thank you to everybody who has been listening to us. And of course, word of mouth is always a wonderful thing to have. So make sure that you tell your friends about us, but also
tell your enemies, especially your enemies.
All of our social media links will be in the show notes for this episode. Make sure that you are leaving your ratings and your reviews for us. And if you're not subscribed to us, why the heck aren't you? Because we are everywhere, including YouTube. And we got a few likes on our YouTube channel, and we appreciate that very much. It was our recent episodes on Sister Helen Prejean and Robert Lee Willie specifically. We don't get a lot of likes on YouTube just yet, so we appreciate everybody who does it.
We're new to YouTube, but you can use all the help we can get, so likes are very much appreciated.
Yes, and we even have some bonus content that all of you might not be aware of. That was Brian's parody series where he would pretend to be a reporter. Is that ever going to happen again? I wonder.
I wasn't pretending. That's not me. That
wasn't you?
That's that British guy who got fired from BBC World Service.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he got sent to Ukraine, and he kept hitting up the bars and the coffee shops, and he talked about what a terrible war zone it was while he was drinking coffee and places where there wasn't any fighting. Yeah, I mean, every country that's at war, there's always parts of the country where none of the fighting's taking place. And, well, we just decided to give David Ford a second chance.
Well, he needs to come back. He's been slacking off.
Yeah, he's probably enjoying the New Orleans cuisine a bit too much.
Maybe so.
The bar life, all that stuff.
Maybe so. All right, so last week we talked about Len Davis. We discussed his cocaine trafficking operation, all of which was helped along by the FBI. But at this point, it's been almost 30 years since Len Davis was convicted. I'm sorry, not convicted, since all of this had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, today's story is about how these waves of corruption just kept like ripples on a pond. You throw a rock into the water and the ripples just keep going and going and going outwards, right?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Same thing. I need to start off by giving a legal definition of Brady law because it comes into play during this discussion. Do you know what Brady material is, Brian?
No.
Okay, so Brady material is the evidence that the prosecutor is required to disclose under this rule.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I get it. Okay, yes. Now I remember. Yes.
Okay. So this includes any information favorable to the accused, which may reduce a defendant's potential sentence, go against the credibility of an unfavorable witness, or otherwise allow a jury to infer against the defendant's guilt. And this is the sort of information that would come to light in the discovery process when both sides are building their case.
Mm-hmm.
If one side has evidence that they must turn over to the other side,
mm-hmm.
they have to do that.
Yes. It's a fiduciary responsibility as an officer of the court.
All right. So during his 7 years on the force, Len Davis had touched hundreds of cases. And in the quarter century since the conviction of Len Davis, Orleans Parish prosecutors never reviewed the cases that he was involved in until about 2021.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's That's a pretty long time.
It is a pretty long time.
And we've gone through what, 2 district attorneys since then?
We have, and they will make guest appearances in this episode. So the review finished when the New Orleans District Attorney's Office, along with a group of defense attorneys, appeared in criminal district court to request that a judge free 3 men who were convicted of a murder based on mainly a description from Len Davis. Okay, that was it. A description. The killing that sent these 3 innocent men to prison happened on August the 22nd of 1994. Someone shot a man named Ronell Santanik in the head as he sat in the passenger seat of a friend's car. The friend went to go call 911, but just 2 minutes after the shooting, before the phone call to emergency services was finished, you'll never guess who rolled up on the murder scene.
Len Davis.
And his partner, Sammy Williams.
Right.
Okay. Len Davis broadcasted on the police radio the description of a suspect named Pernell Mays. According to the court filing, Davis likely botched the name of Bernell Jalouk. He was the half-brother of an up-and-coming rap star named Warren Mays. And Warren Mays was somebody that Len Davis saw as a threat to his drug racket.
Right.
Okay. This is all ties back to his drug rackets.
Mm-hmm.
Every last bit of it. The description was vague. It was a young black male with gold teeth. And that's...
Okay. The 1990s.
Yeah.
In particular.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that kind of triggers something I've told people online and via text message. Look for me at the New Orleans Saints games. I'm the middle-aged, heavy-set white guy with a Drew Brees jersey on. You can't miss me.
Yeah, meaning that's a vague description.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that sounds like a probable cause sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he decided, this person walking down the street minding his own business, fits this description, this probable cause sheet. So we're going to stop him. And tell him that someone who fits your description is suspected of doing this, that, or the other, and we need to see some ID, and we're going to pat you down for weapons, that type of deal.
Well, I was thinking back to those times that I've called emergency services. They generally ask me what the suspect or the person who would perpetrate a crime, they generally ask me what they were wearing. Shirt color, were they wearing jeans or shorts, etc. Because that's a more detailed description than just young black male with gold teeth.
Right.
Okay.
And then when you say you're looking around and you see, young black male. Well, from the inside patrol car, you're not necessarily even going to see teeth at all.
And I'm also going to tell you this. It is not very easy to decipher an age of somebody either. During the course of my job, I do have to ask people for ID before I sell them alcohol. And I tell you, I've asked for ID of people who were in their 30s just because I wasn't sure.
Right,
Okay?
Of course.
It's a hard thing to determine by looking at somebody's their age.
Yes, it can be difficult to tell. I mean, some people age better than others. You do have a few people in New Orleans in particular who are in their 40s, but they can easily pass for 28.
Right.
25 years old.
So 23 minutes later, and five miles from the murder scene, a police officer pulled over Bernell Jalouk, who did have gold teeth. He was a young black male. He was 18 years old. He was riding in a car with his 2 friends, Kunta Gable and Leroy Nelson, who were both 17. The teenagers were unarmed. They were in a sedan that barely matched the description of the vehicle given to emergency services. At the 1996 trial, the lone eyewitness to the crime gave testimony that had changed from his initial dispatch call, yet prosecutors never revealed to the defense that his story had changed. And this is the Brady evidence that this is the reason why I gave that definition. You're supposed to let the defense know, hey, this guy's story has changed.
Yeah, that is a fiduciary responsibility. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not optional.
Right.
It's, to say the very least, besides illegal, it's also unethical.
And on top of all of this, 7 alibi witnesses testified that the teenagers had been at the Iberville public housing complex until moments before the police stopped them. And what's even more, no physical evidence tied them to the crime scene. Right. So they were unarmed. There was no physical proof. Alibis were given. The one eyewitness changed the story, and the descriptions given by Len Davis were vague. In a perfect world, those young men would have gone home that night. But after 10 hours, a jury found the 3 defendants guilty of second-degree murder. All of them were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that's horrible. If you didn't do something like that and you go to jail for it, that's horrible.
Yeah, and the jury had no idea they were dealing on the credibility of a crooked cop, very crooked cop. Most cops aren't crooked, so of course, they don't have any reason to believe otherwise.
Burnell Jaluk told the guy that he was sitting next to, "We're going to Gilligan's Island. They done kidnapped us." And this isn't, and it's not an entirely untrue statement. I mean, technically, yeah, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and people of lesser education are very vulnerable to this.
Yes, they are.
The less educated a client is, the less able he or she is to help their attorney.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Like, for one thing, they're less likely to bring up more relevant things, more relevant facts that can help the attorney plan the defense better.
Julian Parker was the prosecutor during the trial. He worked under the district attorney at the time, Harry Connick Sr., and later on he won a seat on the criminal district court bench. And he served as a judge until 2014. When asked about the miscarriage of justice, Julian Parker said that he couldn't recall the case, the defendants, or the victim. That was 1,000 cases ago. Anybody who says I ever hid Brady evidence is a liar. Well, 5 weeks after that trial, Sammy Williams was in court testifying against Len Davis. Surely not all of this was being discussed heavily in local legal circles. I mean, certainly a judge would not have been hearing about all this, right, Brian?
Well, no, never. They never hear about all this.
Yeah, no, impossible. No evidence exists that Harry Connick Sr. or his successor, Leon Cannizzaro, reviewed cases that Len Davis was involved in. Attempts to reach Harry Connick Sr. and Leon Cannizzaro for comment were unsuccessful, but their silence is very loud, isn't it?
Sure is, yeah.
Mary Howell is the civil rights attorney who represented Kim Groves' family in their lawsuit against Len Davis. She called the delay in reviewing cases associated with him an example of system failure. She also said that it is unacceptable until now that there has been no real effort to reopen or reinvestigate cases involving Len Davis. The current New Orleans District Attorney, Jason Williams, agrees with her. Former New Orleans police officer Len Davis was widely known to wreak havoc on marginalized New Orleanians until his arrest and conviction. It is unfathomable that not a single agency in the past 28 years has engaged in a review of the cases he made during his reign of terror. I believe that we said before in this podcast that we're not especially fond with of Jason Williams, but this is something I fully support him on. I am very glad he's doing this.
Yeah, well, Jason Williams has been, I want to say, the positive way to say he's been on quite the learning curve.
Yes, he has been. That is true. So, the district attorney's office says that this is just the start of the case reviews. I mean, other cases that Len Davis was involved in are being scrutinized. And rightfully so.
Yes, because crooked cops break the law, bend the rules, violate procedures routinely because it's for one or two reasons. Either their ends justify the means types, which sometimes works out for the better, but is an engagement of the very type of abuse that the system wants to avoid altogether. Okay, the type of abuse that sends innocent people to jail, and the other reason is it can also be for profit, like if you're robbing certain drug dealers, and putting them in jail.
Attorney Emily Maw, who heads the Civil Rights Division of the District Attorney's Office, said in court, "We are back in court 28 years later because at every stage, this city has failed the Santanik family and the families of Mr. Jaluk, Mr. Gable, and Mr. Nelson." Judge Tracy Flemings Davalier agreed. In October of 2022, Burnell Jaluk, Kunta Gable, and Leroy Nelson were released from the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. The three men watched from video screens at the prison as the judge set them free. Their friends and family members were in the courtroom and they clapped with joy. And of course, I mean, finally your case was heard. Finally it is known that you did not really do this. And that is a long time to sit in prison.
It sure is, yes.
For something that you had nothing to do with.
Yes, and they might be able to I forget what it's called, they might be able to file a claim against the state.
Well, I certainly hope that they can.
That. Typically, states compensate prisoners who are wrongly held. A certain amount. I mean, of course, it's not worth sitting in jail. Usually, when you get one of those settlements, you're able to buy a house.
Right. Well, that's of course.
I think it depends on how long you've been in jail.
Well, that's of course if they live to see that settlement reach.
Right.
As we said last week, sometimes the state or the city just waits for you to die.
Your city, New Orleans, yes, especially bad with that.
Yes. The judge said that to the three men, "You all are the real heroes of this case. You all deserve the utmost apology for the fact that so many years of your lives were taken for granted and that your lives were stolen from you." When given the chance to speak, Leroy Nelson said, "I'm thankful for everything that happened, and I'm just ready to move on with my life, and that's just about it." Jaluk smiled and saluted, and Gable apologized to Santanik's family, who were not present in court, but he maintained his innocence. He says, "I have never seen your son in my life. I apologize that it had to happen, but I've never seen him in my life." Imagine that. Imagine you're accused of killing somebody you've never even seen before.
Yeah.
Okay. Family members of the men understand that the lone witness in the case was under intimidation by Len Davis. Kunta Gable's two aunts, Shalita Simmons and Elaine Johnson, came to court to see their nephew's conviction overturned. They visited they visited him every month while he was in prison, and that's a hell of a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
That is a long drive from here in the city to Angola prison.
Sure is.
Okay, that's some dedication, and good for them. Last year, during one of the visits, they unfortunately had to deliver news that his mother had died of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But we told him, now you still have two mothers, Shalita Simmons said. I prayed to God every day that he would release you, and today was that day. And that's pretty much the end of it. Whoever really killed that person, no idea. Which is another injustice about this, right? That family who lost somebody is likely never going to know who actually did it.
It's quite common.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Orleans Parish, especially, the majority of murders committed go unsolved.
Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
A case like this is worse than what's called in constitutional law fruit of the poisonous tree.
Okay.
Meaning evidence that you acquired illegally, poisons the case. And once that evidence is thrown out, then the case is quite possibly thrown out as well. But this goes beyond that because this is a bum rap.
Right. Yes. It is a bum rap. I'm glad that they were released. It's utterly ridiculous to me that this happened to somebody only based off a vague description from a police officer. And I'm going to tell you this too. If those men would have been white, this probably wouldn't have happened to them. If they would have been rich white men, they would never have seen the inside of a jail.
Yes, this is another instance of black police officers
exploiting the black community?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So...
Now, there was a local psychologist.
Do you remember the name?
I don't remember her name, but she spoke on this topic of black police officers abusing members of the black community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting theory that involves self-hatred. Meaning it's usually older cops who see younger versions of themselves and they're angry at themselves for the way they were before.
So
they're carrying guilt, and so they're punishing.
Instead of being proud of the people that they became, they haven't really let it go.
They haven't let go their earlier shortcomings in life. And so they see these earlier versions of themselves in these younger people, and they abuse them. And this is similar to the way their parents. Some parents will brutally beat children who are in their lower teens after they failed to properly teach them early in their lives, so they brutalize these kids. Like one example, there were these, when I was still working law enforcement, there were a couple of juveniles who we caught trying to steal a bike, and they were forthcoming with their parents' contact information, and we called their parents as we decided we weren't going to go to juvenile and babysit them for 6 hours, which is pretty much what you had to do at the time. And one of the moms punched her son on the side of her head.
She punched him
on the side of his head. And so the other officer I was with said, wait a minute. And so she looked at him and she said, "He's my kid."
Oh.
And then she grabbed him and left.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly enjoyable to watch this.
Well, no. Why would it be?
To watch that juvenile get punched in the side of his head? Just it was stealing a bike. It wasn't robbery, carjacking, murder.
Yes, and sometimes if you pick up juveniles for something minor like that, that might be enough to scare them straight, actually.
Yeah. Which hopefully that's what happened.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope those juveniles never did anything else ever again.
I mean, that, stealing bikes is something that you can grow out of as a juvenile.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't really... The theft of a bicycle is not one of those adultification crimes where you have to mature in a bad way to be able to commit the crime. It's not one of those crimes. Because it's not, it doesn't involve harming an animal or harming a person. Which, as a juvenile, when you're committing grievous bodily harm upon someone, murdering someone, robbing someone at gunpoint, carjacking someone, they go through an adultification.
Right. They
grow in a bad way. They'll get the 1,000-yard stare.
Mm-hmm.
Their faces will resemble that of third world teenage fighters who were forced into the service of a warlord. You can look at pictures of some of them online, and you see these very desensitized, uncaring faces.
Right.
And truthfully, you see juveniles on the street, you're going to very rarely see that face. I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen those faces. No, that's a very small number of juveniles who are just desensitized to that point.
Well, you certainly have given us a lot to think about, Brian. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Experience is the best teacher.
It is, yeah. That was a pretty strong ending to this episode. So, dear listeners, no coffee talk next week. We are going to be debuting our monthly Southern Crime series, Crescent City Crime Go South. Be prepared for a deep dive into a family annihilator who I will not name until next week. So until then, dear listeners, be safe, be kind. Remember that we're all human beings, and don't park next to vans.
And if it's dark, it's dangerous, and you don't feel safe, don't be there in the first place. Even if you have a concealed carry permit, firearm is nothing more than a tool. It is not a security droid, and it is only to be used as a last resort to resolve a confrontation where your life is in danger. Be your own defense attorney and negotiate your own best possible outcome, which of course could be simply nothing more than don't go to that dangerous place late at night. And if you are being interviewed by law enforcement and you are not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up.